At first in the form of the egg. From the egg, once again he comes out in the form of the various galaxies and solar systems, each solar system producing its own planets, each planet producing its own atoms, each atom undergoing its own cycle of evolution until it reaches its highest illumination of the ayam in itself. This whole process is called the hatching of the egg. And the same existence who is called the ayam will be the cause of the egg in the form of the father bird. And from the egg, the same fellow comes out as the next generation in the form of the child ayam or the chicken. So, the father, the son, and the passage of the father into the son. The mystic language of making us understand what the real Trinity is. For this, the egg is used as the first primordial symbol. And when the egg comes out, there will be an awakening of all the intelligences in the egg. Just as we wake up in the morning, the egg and the parts of the egg wakes up. And just as we remember our yesterday's program and we remember our today's program, the moment we are awake, we are once again busy with our own program. Similarly, the many intelligences that are awakened in the egg, they are already instinctively busy with the program and they begin to behave in terms of the next creation. They need not learn once again. Just as the newly born babe begins to breathe, he need not learn it from anyone. No chemistry professor is necessary to teach him what oxygen is and what carbon dioxide is. Luckily, the child begins to breathe in only oxygen and breathe out only carbon dioxide. Similarly, the many intelligences that come out awakened from this egg, they begin to behave according to the ancient model. They follow exactly the same program which they were following previously. The timetable is the same, the behavior is the same, and the continuity of the program is the same. This is how the behavior of the egg is explained in the scriptures. From God, the Father, the egg comes out. Through the mother, whom we call the nature. From the egg, God the Son comes out, and it is said in the Rig Veda that the one who knows how Father becomes God, how Father becomes Son, he can become the father of his father. That means he can understand that his son also is one of the existences of the same Lord. In that way, he never sees his own son in his son. He does not try to possess his son. He does not try to own his son. See how the scriptures explain this. You should know that you do not belong to yourself. Your body belongs to the minerals of the earth. Your respiration belongs to the air around you. Your power to see belongs to the light in the sun. And everything in you belongs to everything around you. The I am in you belongs to the I am in you. And when you are not your own property, how can you believe that your son is your own property? Or how can a house be your property? Because if we want to see the house, we have to go to the house never comes to us. So we will come to know, to understand the truth gradually. Our son should be understood as one who is like us. Biologically he is our son, but minerally he belongs to the earth, and mentally he belongs to mind which is not your own, because his mind is different from your mind. He does not want what you want exactly. He wants something else, and his mind is modeled into some different way from yours. If you just remember that he does not belong to you, you can consecrate him to the one who is existing in everyone, and then you can do your duties towards him, not as your son, but as the Son of God. So it is not out of your greed to make him great that you do service, but it is out of your humble duty towards God that you do service to your son. Same thing to the wife or husband, same thing to the brother or father, same thing to the neighbor or friend. And if you stop owning in mind anyone, you will be able to live happily, because everything is only duty that is entrusted to you, and there is no expectation. Whatever good comes will be to your joy. And the scripture once again teaches us this in a peculiar mystic way, in its own symbolic way. See how the father is asked to kill the son and offer to God in the same Old Testament. And when the father made everything ready to cut his son, and when he lifted his hand to cut his son, then he hears the voice, "Stop there, lay not thy hand upon your child, because I wanted the child, I never wanted you to kill the child. I only wanted that you offer child, your son, to me." That means you should fully know that he is not your son, but he is my son. The moment that change comes to your mind, there is no necessity to make a physical offering. Unless the change takes place in the mind, even though you make a physical offering, it is useless. It is only for the foolish idea of flattering God we offer physically to God. So, a physical offering without a mental offering. If I present this to my friend physically, but mentally feeling the separation of my own watch, it is not offering, but it is only losing something valuable. So, physical offering is as foolish as it is false. But when the father was prepared to cut his son with pleasure, that means the offering is already made. Then there is no necessity to cut and offer. See how the scriptures teach us. We should just try to read them leisurely and carefully. If you believe that he is the Son of God and he is not your son, that means you have cut him. Cutting means cutting the biological relationship between father and son, and also the astral animal relationship between father and son. Because it is these relationships that cause pain and suffering to human beings. We possess our children and we fancy we love them. We possess our children and we fancy that we are loving them. The jealous wife possesses her husband and fancies that she is loving her husband. The result is sorrow, pain and jealousy. Every day she faces 1,000 occasions to weep, and she calls it love. Love can never make you weep. Love makes you enjoy and enlarge and laugh. But the jealous wife says, I love my husband too much, but every moment he brings me suffering and sorrow. Something which brings us suffering and sorrow can never be called love. So, it is the result of our keeping up the biological relationships and keeping people under ties. It is these animal ties that we are expected to cut. And then remember him as your son. Nothing wrong. The new relationship is divine and it is brilliant. It brings only happiness to your son and yourself, to your wife and yourself, to your husband and yourself, to your brother and yourself, to your neighbor and yourself. This is what the scripture means when it describes that the father wanted to cut the child. And the moment the father prepared to cut the child, God asked him to stop. That means the cutting is finished. The cutting is mental and emotional. And physical cutting is not the one required. The cutoff is executed. That is what is called the offering. That is what is called the sacrifice man has to do to God. This is one way of the scriptures using their symbolism. And this evening we will deal with 2 or 3 more such different aspects of the symbolism of the scriptures. Thank you all. They have contributed much to prepare a group of human beings into the required spiritual manner. As far as Sri Aurobindo is personally concerned, he has made people experience what is transcendence and what is immanence. What is the transcendence of God in the living beings? How God exists in everyone, and what is it that makes man to attempt to transcend into God? And it is the immanence of God presence in every one of us that gives us the attempt to transcend to God. I will once again repeat in more clear terms. The God presence in every one of us, which is already there before we know, that gives us the seed or the tendency to try to know God, and that leads us through the various spiritual initiations until we attain the highest illumination, which we call God consciousness. This age-old formula is once again given to mankind by Sri Aurobindo, not only through his literature but also through his presence. And even after he left his physical body, anyone can get the same presence. The one who meditates upon Sri Aurobindo gets the help and the fillip to attain God. This is the one rare thing Aurobindo has given to the world. And one second rare thing he has given is, he has given a scripture of his own to the 20th century, which we call the Savitri. Just as any other scripture elevates man into God consciousness, the book Savitri also elevates anyone who reads it into God consciousness. These are the 2 rare things that we got from Sri Aurobindo. And the mother, just like the symbolic word the mother, works as grace to Sri Aurobindo's presence. Those who cannot read and understand Aurobindo's books directly, and those who cannot strongly meditate the presence of Aurobindo directly, if they think of the mother and then think of Sri Aurobindo, they will get into the light of Sri Aurobindo. This fact very few people, even among the followers of Aurobindo, know it. This is the one rare thing. Once again, she has established grace on this earth. And those who meditate, they know what it is. Of course, they have given many valuable things through literature, and I speak only of these rare things, because these are the things which cannot be given by everyone. We go on with 2 or 3 more symbols of the scriptural symbolism. We find that some of these symbols carry a history of some thousands of years, during which the symbolism also has sometimes undergone an evolution of its own. For example, the symbol serpent of a certain age is a little bit different from the same symbol after some ages. During certain people, during certain centuries, among certain people, the serpent is considered as something non-sacred. That is what we understand from the Old Testament. It is a symbol of temptation and tempting the human mind into evil. But before that, the serpent has a much wider symbolism, and even after that, the symbol of the serpent has enjoyed much wider symbolism. It seems only among the Jews the serpent was considered as a non-sacred symbol for certain time, and among some sects of the Jews at the same time it was considered as very sacred. Whenever the Christ spoke about serpent, he meant it as a symbol of wisdom or hidden wisdom. He meant it exactly what the yogic symbologists meant by Kundalini. He gave one of his initiations to his disciples in veiled language. Be ye wise as serpents. If we understand it in normal language, it is something nonsense, because we can't believe that the serpents are in any way wise than any other beings. In the physical sense, at best, the serpents are cunning in their nature, but not wise. Cunning. Trickish in a negative way. And only if we know the symbolism of the initiates, we can understand something of the sentence. When the ancients blessed people to be wise as serpents, they blessed them to have the wisdom of the serpent. That is, the wisdom that is concealed in the symbolism of the serpent through ages. See how the yogic symbolism represents the serpent called Kundalini, which is equally concealed and veiled. Because many of those who do Kundalini yoga, they believe that there is a serpent. But those who experience Kundalini yoga, they experience not the physical serpent, but a serpentine principle, a consciousness that is potential, that is concealed in coils within coils. So it is a coiled coil of light, and the light is not what we see as light through the eye. It is not the optic light, but it is the supramental light, which you experience whenever you say, I understand. Whenever you say, I understand this, it means that you have experienced a light on a plane which is a little higher than the mental plane. And whenever you experience that flash of that supramental light, you can translate it only into the words, I understand. Because the experiences which we do and the experiences which the mind cannot understand cannot be translated with this mind in a wise way. The mind can interpret as those experiences only in its known terms. What the mind knows previously, it can make a simile or a metaphor about the new experience, and it cannot directly explain us what it does not know previously. For example, if a born blind man had a dream about great light, and after he wakes up, in what way he can recollect the dream? No doubt he recollects much about it, but he does not know what it is, because the mind has no alphabet to explain to his mind. The next morning he wakes up and explains to his wife, something very great and very happy and very beautiful I could experience. But he can't express, I have seen something, because from his childhood, from his birth, he did not know what seeing is. But in a dream he has seen sunrise and sunset, and seen beautiful flowers in bunches. And the next morning he explains, there was beautiful, it was joy to me, and more than that he cannot explain, because the whole psychological mechanism is only a behavioristic one, having no creative principle in it. It is like some plaster clay that can receive some impressions, and then only it can carry the impression. In the absence of any impressions, the mind cannot carry any wisdom at all. So, unless there was something in the form of habit or behavior previously, the psychological mechanism has nothing to teach you or explain you. Even though you receive a light which is new to the psychological mechanism, it is dumb and it is perplexed. It is confused and it cannot interpret things to you. Similarly, those who experience Kundalini can understand by the word serpent. There is something which they experience. That is a great light of the supramental plane, which is folded and coiled, and the little coils within the bigger coils are fit tightly to make the solid of what we call the mind. Just as a packet which packs the watch cannot show us the time, so also the packet which we call mind cannot give us an idea of what the coils contain inside. We are living with this mind with its psychological mechanism, which is too gross and which is rather too rough to explain the coils that are concealed in it. It is only an outer layer of the inner contents. What we call the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, the total put together forms only the outer layer of the inner content. And since we are living only with the outer layer, though the inner coils belong to us, we do not know that they belong to us. But if by any chance you happen to open the packet on your birthday, you will be able to experience the glitter of a million lightnings in a split second, and that glitter is not yours, but that is yourself. But you are not habituated in experiencing yourself. All through the life you are habituated mostly in experiencing what is yours. I can take care of my pencil because it is mine. It is not myself. I can take care of my shirt. I can take care of my mind, my intelligence, my will, my everything. And all through the life we are accustomed to live with what we have, and we are not in any way habituated to live with what we are. So this glitter will be experienced as something different from ourselves, and after a few times experience we begin to establish a communication with ourselves which was not there previously. We have all communications with everything which belongs to us, but we have no communications with ourselves because we never suspected that we are ourselves. We were sure that what we have was ourselves. For some time we identified our existence with our wealth and money, what we have. And whenever I purchase a new pair of shoes, I identify myself with my shoes, and I may exist with my shoes for 2 or 3 days. And whenever there is a scratch upon my shoe, I feel that there is a scratch upon myself. And whenever I purchase a new motor car, I get identified myself with the motor car for at least 1 month. And I begin to live as my motor car and not as myself. And if someone throws a stone upon the motor car, I definitely feel the pain that he has thrown the stone upon myself. If something is sick to the hand or the leg,